Today I'm here with Clayton Mendel. He is the distiller at Devil's Creek Distilling here in Mammoth Lakes, California. Family-owned business, and he's here to share with us what he does on a daily basis and his experience in Mammoth. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joseph. It's a pleasure. Cool. Get to check out your very cool setup here and kind of talk with you.
Cool.
So my name's Clayton, and I'm the distiller at Devil's Creek Distillery here in Mammoth Lakes. We are a family-owned and operated distillery, and our primary focus is on bourbon. But we also do a couple other American-style whiskeys, rye whiskey, and then a American single malt whiskey too. So,
since we're on that topic, let's dive right in. We'll kind of jump around a little bit, but let's talk about your specialty real quick. So let's touch on that. You said you specialize in single malt, right?
Actually, our specialty is bourbon.
Bourbon.
So about 75% of our production capacity is dedicated to bourbon.
Okay. And real quick, what's the difference between a bourbon and a whiskey?
So whiskey is a catch-all for just denotes anything distilled from grain. And so it doesn't specify barreling. It doesn't specify certain, when you start diving into categories like bourbon or rye or American single malt whiskey, you start adding additional criteria to those. For example, what takes it from a bourbon or from a whiskey to being a bourbon whiskey is that it's distilled from at least 51% corn. It's distilled below 160 proof. It's barreled, so it's put into a barrel below 125 proof. Then it's bottled above 80 proof, and it can't have anything that's had imparts any color or additional flavor to it. So basically water is the only thing that can go back into it.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So that's a little taste for us right now. Let's kind of dive in. Let's take a few steps back. We're going to have tons of questions on whiskey, but let's talk about your experience with Mammoth. Clayton has been in the area for 20 years. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And tell us, how did you get to Mammoth? Like, what brought you here, and what was your first impression?
I'd grown up skiing here as a kid. Growing up in Southern California, I moved all over a lot. My father was in the automotive industry, but we spent a lot of time in Southern California, and I ultimately graduated high school in Orange County from Foothill High School, and went back to school in the UP in Michigan, but then moved back in 2002 back in with my parents in Orange County, and was still at that point was coming up skiing, and then it just so happened that one summer I was up here mountain biking, and I happened to see a job posting from the County Office of Education here, and just on a whim, I was like, what can it hurt to fill out an application for them, and just kind of forgot about it. I was working as a consultant down in Orange County at the time doing IT work, and ended up being back up here mountain biking again later that summer, and was actually on my way back down south when they called me to come for it's like, I'm on the road in Lone Pine, and they're like, can you be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow for an interview? And it's like, I can't say no. So it was like a quick turnaround, hit Kmart, grabbed something like decent, presentable to wear, and did the interview up in Bridgeport the next morning, and then went home. And again, like, forgot about it, never called. And a few months later, they called me back and were like, hey, so you weren't our first pick, but the first candidate did not work out, and like, can you start next week? And it's like, okay, cool. It was like loaded up a U-Haul and mad scramble to like try to find a place to live up here. And that was it. So I've been here since. I've done up until 2018 with where I started with the distillery. I primarily worked as a network and system administrator up here. So from a variety of places.
So Southern California born, you have some ties to Michigan, came back. You've always been tied to the Eastern Sierra in some way or another, mainly due to recreation. And you're lucky enough to see this job. You got it.
Right, so it's a bit more complicated than that. I wasn't born in Southern California. I was actually born in Minneapolis, in
Got
Minnesota.
it. Okay.
And then through the years, I lived in Chicago, Michigan several times, both Northern and Southern California several times, Georgia. So it was I really did travel around, and so Michigan was familiar when I was looking for places to go. And yeah, at the time when I graduated high school, it was much more and if you don't know anything about the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, it's this is going to sound familiar. It's very geographically isolated. It's sparsely populated and heavily wooded. So I mean, there's no obviously I have an affinity for that sort of environment, and so I left Southern California looking to get back to that, and enjoyed my time in Northern Michigan. When I came back, obviously here we are, very geographically isolated, sparsely populated, and fairly heavily wooded. So it was a kind of a natural place that I continued to enjoy.
So what do you think? What do you think is so special about heavily wooded areas, and something that what kind of connection was there in that? Is it just because your parents brought you up in that environment?
So growing up, so I'm an Eagle Scout. Growing up, I spent a lot of time camping, and a lot of time in these backcountry areas. Mount Whitney was a iconic trip that we did one year, and I also spent a lot of time back in the Midwest. A lot of time in the boundary waters in northern Minnesota. So those are the boundary waters are. Just there's lakes everywhere, right? And you just go out there and canoe for weeks on end and just hop from one lake to another. And also did time up in Quetico Provincial Park up in Canada. So lots of time in a canoe and lots of time walking around in the woods, I guess.
Very cool. Okay, yeah, so you've always had this kind of attachment to the area or to similar looking areas.
Probably more wild environments, right. One with nature, right?
Yeah,
I guess.
I totally. That's beautiful. And so then went to college. What's one of your fondest memories of Mammoth? I know you mentioned Mount Whitney. Is there something similar that you experienced here in town?
I'm trying to think if since I've been here, if there's really any one thing that stands out. And it's certainly different once you move here versus visiting. I think the visiting the experience is I don't know, more just punctuated. Everything is magic, right? You're coming here, and that's what you're coming here for. And I think living here, you can lose focus of that sometimes. But I do remember just an absolute legendary trip. So my parents had, in the mid-'90s, they'd purchased a condo over at Mountainback. And they continued to have that. And so while I was here at school in the States, in Michigan, my parents and my brother moved over to the UK. My dad was with Ford at the time, so he did a stint over there for a few years. And they had this condo out here, and it was always a second home for us. So we spent a lot of Christmases out here. But in college, I went to school and joined a fraternity there, a small local fraternity, and a couple of good friends there, big into snowboarding. And I was like, so hey guys, for spring break this year, do you guys want to drive out west and ski some real mountains? And these are people who had grown up in the Midwest, and the mountains are hills there, and it's 800 vertical feet is huge. And so we all five of us piled into a minivan this first year, and just trucked it out here. And I'll never forget. So it was so impactful that two of the people on that trip ended up moving out here after college, and still keep in touch with them, and
Oh, wow.
it's it was a cool trip.
That's really cool. That's beautiful. So you got your job at Mono County IT
The Mono County Office of Education.
Office of Education.
So yeah, it's kind of separate entity from Mammoth Unified School District, separate entity from Mono County.
Got it. And you had to find housing, and what'd you do for that?
Yeah, so it was same thing. Like start looking in classifieds, start making calls, and went around and visited, checked out a few places, and man, let me tell you, I'm sure there's still like some of these weird places for rent around here, but converted attics. So this would have been in 2003. So it's like converted attic with like a hot plate for like $700 a month, and a studio cabin in the woods, like tiny old cabin. In the woods for it was like $800 or $900 a month. So it was still really expensive for, again, like weird places. And I ended up reaching out to the like prospective employer at the time, the County Office of Education, and like, hey, do you guys have a line on anybody who's renting anything? And I ended up finding a place that way.
So you're just lucky enough through your employer to have found a place, basically. Was it nice, or was it kind of?
It was nice.
Okay,
and
good.
So, I mean, I was lucky enough at the time that the superintendent had properties that he was renting.
Oh.
And so I was connected through him from the department that I was managing, or that was hiring me, and it was reasonably priced. When I first started renting, it was like $600 a month or something, and it was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. Mm-hmm. My first place in my like first real job, right? So I mean, 23 years old, right? So, and then my fraternity brother ended up moving out that winter too. So we were sharing rent then. So
Got it. So it was pretty cheap. And so you've been here for 2 decades. You started a family here. Even you've explored the area as a teenager, and so I have to ask you this because I'm a real estate agent. What's your whole view on the housing crisis, and maybe some personal stories that you have?
I mean, this is a deep
Rabbit hole.
This is a rabbit hole,
Let's
man.
keep it at 2 minutes.
My view on the housing crisis is, I mean, there legitimately is a shortage of housing. My wife and I were fortunate enough that 10 years ago we were able to buy a place. So right coming out of the bottom of the like 2008-9 real estate downturn. Yeah. It's like, hey, look, this isn't going to last forever. And so we really downsized into a small studio condo, saved a bunch of money for a year, begged, borrowed, and stole our way into a like 5% mortgage on this place. And it's in a great complex, but I watched a unit in our complex be in a small 15-unit complex. I watched it be rented for $4,200 a month. And these are like 2-bedroom loft with an attached garage. So, I mean, the garage is definitely a premium in Mammoth. I don't know if it's that much of a premium. So from an affordability standpoint, it's like, I know I couldn't afford that. Like, we couldn't afford that to live here. So there definitely is a problem. As to what that problem is, obviously that's a matter of some debate, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I think my whole 2 cents about watching all these town council meetings and, seeing some of the issues and being kind of on both sides of things, because I think real estate agents have a very interesting perspective where it's like, Grace and I were both, a young couple trying to make our way in this ultra expensive county. And we see our friends come and go, but then also we deal with, our clients who are buying these places mainly as second homes. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I find that the real estate agent perspective is super interesting, and we see both sides. And what I came to a conclusion is that maybe Airbnb has contributed. It's not the sole problem, but it's contributed. But banning them probably won't do much.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. So my kind of take on why we're seeing this, and so California's had has had a housing issue for multiple decades at this point, and it's construction has always lagged demand in the state, and you could argue that it's onerous regulation, just cost prohibitive, whatever it is. I think the interesting thing now is that the phenomenon is really a national issue. I mean, you would be hard pressed to find a community that is not experiencing rapidly increasing rents, increasing home costs. I mean, it's everywhere. And I mean, I guess at that point the question is, well, why is it everywhere? And my take on this is that this comes down to, and I told you this was a rabbit hole, so hold on just a second. This is capital seeking a safe harbor, essentially. This has been a poor monetary policy, and so people need, if you're sitting on $15-20 million, you can't leave that in a bank account. And these are the kinds of people who are deploying capital into real estate that aren't BlackRock, right? BlackRock buying 30% of all home purchases in the country. There's a reason why they're doing that. And that's because there's not a lot of other safe places perceived safe to put capital these days. So, to that end, I think you're right. Until the monetary environment changes, you're not going to see, you can put all the local moratoriums in place that you want, and you're not going to see any change. I mean, this is indifferent capital just looking for a home to sit where they're not, you can't park it in a 5% account. You're losing real, it's a negative earning with inflation. So
right.
A real negative interest rate. So
yeah. So buy your Mammoth condo today.
And I mean, I'll also add that Mammoth home prices aren't out of line within the state, right?
Right.
In fact, I would say that home prices in Mammoth are actually probably lagging certain areas in the state, and it's pretty. It's a tightrope that the town council is walking, saying that they want to see home prices in Mammoth decline and create forced sellers in the market to resolve the housing issue, right? So I think that's a pretty dangerous position to take. So.
All right, you heard it from a local himself.
Hey, look. I mean, and I may be biased. I am a homeowner, but I mean, you mess with people's money. I mean, homes are essentially people's retirement vehicles these days, and yeah, I mean, it's people get really upset about that sort of stuff.
Right. Gotta pay to play, as some will say.
I guess.
And so we got enough. Let's get down to the real topic here, and we want to get more into Devil's Creek Distillery. And so, just tell us about the origin of the business. How did it start? Whose idea was it? And what does it look like today?
Yeah. So this all started. We had a little bit more than a passing interest in whiskey and distilled spirits, kind of 2013 timeframe. And about that time, my brother got a book for my dad that Colin Spellman from Kings County Distillery in Brooklyn, New York, wrote. And it was the Urban Distiller's Guide to Moonshining. Don't quote me on that. You could find it if you look for that, but that might not be exactly right. But anyways, my dad really took a shining to it, and at the time he was working for Honda Automotive, and he was traveling. He'd spend about 2 weeks a month traveling, and he always had like a down day or half day, and he started taking kind of side trips to craft distilleries, small distilleries in the area, just to kind of check out. And at that time, craft distilling was not really there were some craft distilleries, but like the boom hadn't really happened. And I would say even like the whiskey boom or the bourbon boom was maybe just getting started. It certainly did not as crazy as it's gotten. And so it's like, that was cool. We started doing some additional research, and kind of one thing led to another. And in 2014 or 15, we started hearing rumblings of lobbying in the state of California for this craft distilling legislation. And so it wasn't until January 2016 that this was really craft distilling was even a thing in California. Prior to that, there was no on-premise sales. So you couldn't do any tasting. So you basically were beholden to large distributors who have very high barriers to entry into the market. So you didn't see anybody come along that was small, right? There was just no way to make it. And so that happened, and my parents, we all kind of sat down. My parents were looking for a second career. My dad was on a retirement trajectory at the time, but they wanted something else to do, and kind of together this time. And so that was it. I mean, January rolled around, and we submitted our paperwork to the TTB, which is the licensing and regulation branch of the ATF, and for our federal DSP, which is a distilled spirits plant license. And it was about 18 months for that process to go through, and that includes getting licensing from the state, so California ABC as well, and then local jurisdictional licensing and approval. And so at the time, we started in just a small 800 square foot rented industrial space down in the business park, and that gradually grew into 2, and then 3 spaces total that we were renting down there. And we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity last summer when a building across the street came up. We were able to purchase that property and then move in there, which is a large expansion for us because we were out of space in those 3 units. And so that's kind of what we've been doing. We started distilling July 2017, and I was going to say, we haven't stopped, but that's not true because there was that thing that happened in 2020 that we were closed for 14 months. We made hand sanitizer for 3 months, and then kind of went right back to whiskey production. So
that's a good little breakdown. And so from 2017, from that first barrel, from putting alcohol in a barrel to selling that first bottle, how long did that take?
So we opened our tasting room October 2018, and so we started selling product then. And at the time, it was just it was a 1-year-old bourbon product, and it was I think like a 6 or 7 month old rum product. And so those were the kind of the initial offerings that we had on.
And how was it from the start? Was it a hit? Was it slow go?
It was a slow go, and we always had the mindset that it's very. If you're getting in the aged spirits game and you're not doing anything clear, and there's no like quick, hey, we're turning product from the still to the bottle to sell. We knew it was going to be a kind of a slow burn, and so you have this really long-term mindset with everything. So I've kind of taken to a look at everything in like a 4-year time frame. The stuff that I produce today is going to be in barrels for at least 4 years. So, I mean, we're producing for like 28, 29 now at the earliest. So it was it was a slow process getting started, gradually expanding our production capacity, kind of year after year, and then again this last year. And it was just a matter of always producing more than we were planning on bottling, and kind of once you hit the 4-year mark on all your product, then it's like, okay, now we kind of have all these barrels up, and we can start pulling from those and start pulling. And I should say, like, this whole 4-year mindset comes because you kind of have 2 milestone ages in production of whiskey, and that's so if you see something like it says straight bourbon whiskey, anything that carries that straight designation is a minimum of 2 years old. So that was kind of the first hurdle for us a few years ago, and then anything under 4 years has to carry an explicit age statement. So you can't say age less than 4 years. You can say aged at least 3 years, or you can get very granular with it, be like aged 37 months, or however you want to do it. It just has to be explicit. You can't overstate it, but you can understate it. And but at 4 years, you can drop the age statement, so you can do what's called a 4-year non-age stated product. So anytime you see a product on the shelf that says straight, doesn't carry an age statement, it's at least 4 years. And so that was the goal that we're shooting for.
Is there a noticeable difference from a whiskey that's aged 3 years to 4?
You know what? Actually, there is for us. Yeah. And I imagine other distilleries see it too. I think it's because of how dry we are. We have a very moderate climate, and we're in a warehouse here versus like a rick house or barn, which would obviously be much colder here in the winter. We don't do a lot of temperature control, but we do like to keep it, kind of above 50 at a minimum. And then what I see is those first 3 years, you get a lot of flavor extraction in the barrels, and you're getting angel share losses, which is the evaporation of water and alcohol through the wood in the barrel. But kind of once enough of that evaporation takes place, you get more headspace that opens up in the barrel, and then it kind of starts accelerating. And then because we're so dry, we lose more alcohol proportionally than water. So while, let's say we put it in the barrel at 100 proof, you might see a couple points increase over those first 3 years. We'll see, we might jump from like 105 to 110 over that year 3 to 4, whereas those first 3 years only went from 100 to 105.
So there is like almost like a breaking point from year 3 to 4, mainly because of that headspace you said.
Yeah, and every barrel's a little different. Our new space is a little different too, aging-wise, because most of the barrels previously were in separated spaces, and now we're in the barrel's cohabitated space with production, so there's more humidity in there, not by design, not intentionally. So you're constantly learning, how is this affecting what's going on, and I really just try and roll with it. I don't, you can drive yourself mad overthinking all of these things and trying to design a product and a process and for an eventual outcome. But really I prefer just to let it happen. And then you can manage that on the blending and maturation side of things.
So we're now getting deep into it. But what do you think there's a huge difference about distilling alcohol at elevation?
There is. Anybody who's come up to the mountains knows that your pasta takes longer to cook, your rice takes longer to cook. And that's because the boiling point of water is lower up here because of the lower atmospheric pressure. And so we have, distilling's the same way. All your boiling points shift down. So your distillation operation ends up running much cooler than it does at, say, sea level. A couple advantages there. Our still runs at a higher proof than it would at sea level. So we run just a simple pot still, and we double distill that, and it gives us all the proof we need.
Wow. So what do you think makes you different from maybe the big guys and also maybe some of the other local distilleries around here?
Well, I will say that I think the biggest differences you're going to find between any craft distillery those are going to be the most apparent when comparing with the big guys. And in fact, some of the craft industry and some of the more like enthusiast focused products out there have really driven the craft guy or the like heritage distilleries, the big guys, to rethink their product lineups. And so it wasn't that long ago that things that were barrel proof were really hard to come by. There were maybe only a handful of products on the market that you would find, above 100 proof. And now we get, consumers actively looking for that. It's like, oh, if it's not 100 proof, or at least 100 proof, it's like, oh, man, I like it 110, or, I like it over 120. And so people really go out there hunting for those things and really start, learn to enjoy those at higher proofs. And so I think a lot of that's been driven by like craft and just driving awareness with consumers. Also, so probably the biggest single difference that craft does versus the big guys is probably the quality of grains. The big guys are getting rail cars of corn a day, and the industry at large generally uses a grade number 2 yellow dent corn, which is one grade below like a food grade product and one grade above like a feed grade product. And so it's not bad, it's not good, it's just kind of like it's corn. You make whiskey with it. But the craft distillers generally go out of their way because you're sourcing much smaller quantities to source a higher quality product. And so, for example, all of our malt is coming out of Admiral Maltings in Alameda. They're the only floor malting facility on the West Coast. They started very focused on the beer industry, but probably about 4 years ago, they started reaching out to distilleries in California, craft distilleries. And so we source, like I said, we source all of our malt from them, including our rye. And there's just all these little things. Again, they're a very craft operation too. So they contract grow specific strains of barley with like very small family farms here in the state. And they have first of all, they put out a fantastic product. So huge differences between them and like other big malt houses that I've worked with. And so, just quality grain.
Mm-hmm.
The craft guys are just going to be sourcing better grain, and it makes a huge difference in the finished quality of the product.
Right. Yeah, we should do like a taste test. Just get like a Jack Daniels or something.
I'll tell you like some blind. You got to do it blind, right?
Oh, yeah.
So because I mean that's the you'll really dive into it then.
Yeah, that'd be fun. And so it sounds like quality product, and being in this area just makes it all different. How's the community of distillers here in Mammoth and the area? Because it seems like there is like a brewery in every little town almost. Is there a tight knit community too?
Have you heard of the Eastern Sierra Ale and Spirits Trail?
With the patches?
With the patches?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that that's very representative of the community. I feel like it's a very cooperative community, and everybody's we're all just doing our own things, and nobody's out looking for like total market domination, right? And the good news is today, like today's consumers are looking for a variety of things. They want to try different things, and the person that's stuck in their way is drinking the same Jack and Coke that they have been for 20 years. They're not a potential consumer anyways, so like you're not competing for them. So it's today's consumers want to explore and experience things, and I think that's one of the cool things about the Ale and Spirits Trail. It used to just be the Ale Trail, but now it includes also spirits. So this is the first year for us on it. So.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, it seems like it would be really cool, like along with the patches, to like even like some type of basket where you can get like a bunch of different spirits and beer would be pretty sweet.
Hey, or souvenirs and I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't a part of that conversation. Somebody from our distillery was. I believe it was my father. But we, it's a great program. We've had a bunch of people come through for it, cool. And working their way through the trail. So.
How long does that last? Is the whole year?
Yeah, I mean, I think It's at least a year-long thing.
Okay.
I think it's just kind of an ongoing thing. I'm not sure there's a terminus for it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we should give it a shot. I remember when you guys were at your older location, and I loved it because it was like basically the best deal in town. You could go get like 2 shots basically for and talk about it for $10. And I thought it was a great deal. You would go in just really small little room, really cozy, and you basically drink with the Mendels. And it was super fun. You could go in the back, take a tour, see all the cool equipment that you have. And now you have a bigger location just across the street. I love the location because it is off the beaten path, and you get to experience a little different part of Mammoth. It's in the industrial circle right behind the skate park. And with you have a new kind of business model there, do you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things stayed the same, right? So you're going to come in. It's still just going to be the 3 of us. It's usually my mom, my dad, myself that are there. Tastings are still $10. We do cocktails now too, and our winter cocktail menu's is fairly limited right now. So we're doing Manhattans and we're doing hot toddies, right? So obviously the new space, we have a better back bar. So this was not something we could do in the other location. New space is bigger. You might say less intimate, but we haven't really felt that way yet. It's just a better flow. We still do tours. And then one of the interesting things that we've noticed now with the cocktails and a little bit bigger space is we found a lot of people like coming down for, especially on the busier weekends, for just après after. We're in town. I mean, granted, we're on the very edge of town down there in the business park, but there's free parking. You can just kind of pop down there. Granted, we only do like 1 round of cocktails or tastings per person per day because that's what we're restricted to by the ABC. But they can grab a table, sit there with their friends, and just kind of like chill out and not fight crowds, not wait in lines. And we've had a lot of people doing that and then coming back to keep doing that. So it's been a kind of interesting experience. Not just people coming to like, hey, we saw your billboard in Mojave, or our slogan is bourbon made in Mammoth. So a lot of people come to, like, whiskey hunters come like, oh, we saw your billboard in Mojave. You can't miss it. It's 40 feet. It says bourbon made in Mammoth. And they're like, so like we had to stop on the way in town. We like looked it up and we're like, oh, what's this? There's bourbon in Mammoth. And so, it's not just the like whiskey hunter crowd. So
Yeah, it seems like just like a really great place to come by. Doesn't really matter what time. It could be after skiing. But you guys do open at 4 p.m., right?
We Fridays and Saturdays 3 to 6.
3 to 6.
We do appointments during the week. So somebody's typically there. It's usually me, running some sort of production operation. But we get people who stop through town. We've got somebody who drives a truck shipping packages. I won't say for who occasionally his route around the country brings us through Mammoth, and he always calls us and stops in. He and his co-driver, and it's like, hey, grab a couple bottles and head back on my route. And so it's interesting. We also do events there too. So we've done taken advantage of kind of that larger space, and have hosted a couple events for folks looking for kind of venue space.
Did you like weddings or anything like that?
Bachelor parties. We've done a couple wedding receptions. We did a party for some locals here in town. We're looking at a party for the film festival this weekend. So.
Oh yeah, I need to get on that. I want to go to
that. Oh yeah, there's a thing.
Yeah.
Not associated with the film festival. It's a group who are doing a film in the film festival, and they want someplace to go after the screening. So,
very cool.
Again, it's like a very flexible space for that like kind of 30 to 50 person crowd. So
awesome. Makes me want to go get a drink. And someone asked, what do you think of Japanese whiskey?
I like that. Okay. I appreciate lots of different styles of whiskey. My favorites definitely tend on the bourbon side of whiskey. I find Japanese very Scotch adjacent, more maybe just a little bit more delicate. I do like my Scotches heavier handed, so I'm a big Islay fan, Ardbeg, Lagavulin, Laphroaig, those big, like, very, very divisive. A lot of people are just like, oh my God, it's like a campfire in a bottle, or, whatever. It's just too smoky, too peaty. I love it, especially on in the summer when we get those like rainy days. We just sit on the deck, pour something really funky from that's like briny and cured meats and all sorts of weird flavors going on in there. And
what do you think of peat, and do you use peat in any of your product?
So we have what do I think of peat? I like peat. I don't know any peats right now, but the peated malt, I think there's a lot of nuances and flavor to explore in lower quantities of peat. Like I've done some things that if I didn't tell you it was explicitly peated, you might not pick up, but it generates flavors in there that you wouldn't otherwise get. And I'm talking like very, very low quantities of peat. The smokiness of peat comes through very, very prominently in your distillate. So like a light touch, I think, is better than a heavy touch. Like if you go in and make 100% smoked, peat smoked, like American single malt whiskey, it's gonna be a lot. And you talk about like Islay Scotch as being very divisive in that regard. It's not a bad thing. It's just like if it's not your cup of tea, it's like really not your cup of tea. So that being said, our current 6th release of our Adventure series is a peated American single malt right now. And this was actually started off as an experimental barrel, but it was really like a test profile barrel for doing some more peated single malt. You can go from the theoretical, we're looking at parts per million for phenols and finished products, and how does that compare to other products on the market, and where do we want to land with that peat profile, to eventually just have to go to the actual like practical application of this. It's like, okay, we got about as far on the back of the napkin here as we can, and now we just need to like make a barrel and see what it does. And so that was this first barrel, and we've actually been producing a peated single malt product in our used cooperage for the last 3+ years, and so that will come out on our product line maybe next year. So,
what's your Adventure series?
Our Adventure series is a limited, infrequent release of sometimes experimental mash bills, sometimes barrel finished products. Actually, all of our barrel finished products. We haven't done a main like release that's barrel finished yet. All of our barrel finishing goes on Adventure series too. So we typically do about 2 releases a year. We'll probably do 3 this year, just because we have a lot of experimental barrels in inventory that are kind of like everything. As I mentioned before, everything's coming up over 4 years, and so everything's starting to get really good. It's just like when things get good, it's like we just want to bottle it and share it with people. So
yeah, it seems to be one of your most popular lines. How many bottles do you have of your number 6?
Man, we're down to probably less than 10 bottles of our number 6 right now. But don't worry, like number 7 is already in the bottle. And again, like this is what's fun about the Adventure series. It's a complete departure from this peated American single malt. It's a bourbon barrel that's been finished it's a bourbon whiskey finished in a maple syrup barrel. So again, like completely different. And we've done a maple syrup barrel finished rye before. That was a huge hit, and that one was unfortunately our shortest release at like 82 bottles. So not a lot of people got that one.
Ooh, yeah, it's quick, and everyone loves them, and so yeah, you got to go in quick. And then you have like a local artist do the cover art. Is that true?
We don't. Okay, so we haven't worked with a local artist yet, and I know this is it's on the to-do list. Mm-hmm. And we actually work through a broker out of France called Art Majeur. And the reason for that is, one, the extensive catalog of art, ranging everything from photography to sculpture. But two, it's they have a a lot of their art has options for commercial licensing, and because we're reprinting the art on a label, rather than having a lawyer draw up contracts with an artist right now or in the last couple of years, it's just been an easier process for us to do it that way. So we can search the catalog of art. So we're not talking about like trying to commission something or buy something existing. And plus, we like to purchase the originals too. So we've only failed in that with one that we really, really liked, and that was the Snow Queen last year. She just wouldn't sell us the original, and we liked the art so much. It was like, fine, we'll just get a print. It was super cool, but yeah.
Very cool. That makes sense. And so you have tons of knowledge on the subject. You wouldn't think someone in IT would become a distiller. Where did all your education come from?
You wouldn't think, would you? I think one of the interesting things about the distilling industry or craft distilling industry is people come from all walks of life. So I've listened to a lot of podcasts and people talk. People come from all over. They come from the business world. They come from the science world. Very seldom are these craft distillers coming from we're like biochem engineers or something. Most of those people are in the larger space or have been for a long time. My background, I do have an engineering background. I went to an engineering school as a mechanical engineer. I never worked professionally as a mechanical engineer. And the reason for that was 95% of graduates from my school went to go work for the big three in Detroit. I lived in Detroit, and I kind of had a realization end of my junior year. Was like, ooh, yeah, I don't want to go work in a basement in Detroit. So a really quick pivot was like, hey, good at this with this computer thing. Maybe there's some legs to that. And you know what? There's computers all over. I can go do this anywhere. So it ended up being a pretty wise choice, I think.
I agree. You're in a family business. What are some of the biggest challenges working that closely with your family?
We don't really have any issue. We've been at this now for a minute, and we don't really have any issues anymore. I think we all, the biggest thing early on was learning to stay in your lane, right? We don't have very clearly defined. We don't have very clearly defined roles from a typical corporate structure. Nobody reports to anyone. Nobody has a specific set of duties or responsibilities, but we do each have like an area of responsibility or expertise. So it's a much more chaotic because again, like there's no like top down management to this. It's so like I run the production. My dad does a lot of the he does wholesale and like B2B relations. My mom does all the accounting and administration. My wife does all the social media. So it's and marketing. So it's just if you're going to do something in production, check with me first. Maybe it doesn't need to be done. Maybe I'm doing something differently this time. It's like you never know, right? So
do you have like weekly or monthly meetings?
We do. We meet monthly, at least once a month. But we see each other all the time. My parents obviously live in town, and so we see each other multiple times a week. So sometimes we'll just have like quick stand-up meetings, or obviously in the tasting room. I mean, we're there every week too. So it's like, hey, if something came up that week that needs to be addressed, it's like we all, we're all there for it. So,
what's one of the things that you most enjoy running this business?
It's I think the biggest plus has been the time flexibility and ability to make my own schedule. It's demanding. I mean, I generally do work 6 or 7 days a week, but it's not full days every day all the time. And so I have a young family, and it allows my wife and I to kind of juggle. She works too, and so we're able to juggle with the kids. And I think it's a big win for us because it allows us to do things like homeschooling. So I mean that is really kind of the probably the biggest
Mm-hmm.
single like personal impact that it has on me.
What's your vision for Devil's Creek Distillery, say in 5-10 years from now?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so this is obviously this is like something we talked a lot about moving into that new facility. We sized some big equipment going into that facility, and at the end of the day, it really just came down to what do we want to be? What is this brand going to be? We had no aspiration to be a national brand. One, you can't compete at those economies of scale with the big guys. They can always undercut you. And then, I mean, especially in California, right? One of our biggest consumables is energy. And so energy costs, as everyone in California is aware, is outrageous. But like, what can we do? What are our strengths? And Mammoth is actually, where we're located is actually a big strength for us. We have a large, diverse group of people who are constantly rotating in to visit. And so it's there's this kind of mantra of like, own your backyard. And where do we go from there is kind of where we're at now. And California is a huge market. So much so that we're just really kind of expanding our focus to Southern California. So we're hoping to start to see more of our small batch bourbon product on the shelves this summer in the Southern California markets. So I mean that's I mean, Southern California is essentially our backyard as well too, because that's where everybody comes from Mammoth. 90% probably visit from. So,
what are some things as you expand that you need to hold true?
Like this, you can grow at the expense of quality, and then where do you stay product first with the brand, or like true to your principles? And we do kind of have this mantra of we don't want to rush things and not cut corners, and so that goes back to like really working to hold product back until it was at least 4 years old. So not that we didn't sell. I mean that was our like compromise in the business model. We weren't sourcing product. We weren't making clear spirits. So it's like, okay, with the acknowledgement that for the first kind of like few years, we're going to be selling products that's less than 4 years. The goal is to start selling most of it after it's been 4 years.
That makes sense. And yeah, so now you can call it aged.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we can drop the age statement, and this goes back to expanding into like the larger Southern California market. You don't have to handwrite. We're not going to be handwriting an age statement on the bottles. Everything's going to go to a fixed 95 proof on our small batch bourbon side. So it streamlines the labeling operation. So my poor mom's not handwriting a bunch of things on every single bottle, which is great when you're talking about, now we're going to do like 10,000 plus bottles a year. Yeah. So
you have all the equipment to measure the alcohol content?
We do. Yeah. I mean, so you can get as simple or as fancy as you want. So, I mean, simple temperatures and density measurements tell you specifically. There's expensive tooling out there from Anton Par that give you very like precise temperature corrected measurements instantaneously. So there's lots of stuff to do that, and there's labs you can send your product to also to validate that stuff too. So
earlier you mentioned that you homeschool, and I was just wondering, as we kind of channel out, are there a couple of things you wish you could change about Mammoth?
Oh man. Mammoth is an interesting microcosm of the world, and the things that I would change about Mammoth are probably things that I would like to see change in the world. It ends up being like, I mean, this is our little world, right? So you see every little thing, whatever's going on at town council, like everyone sees all the dirt under the rugs around here, right? So, I think, and I mean, this is probably cliche, but like, we could all be like a little bit more understanding of different views, accepting of each other's, chosen walks in life, and more welcoming to people coming to experience this like wonderful corner of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've always thought about that too with Grace. Where it was like, besides having such like maybe like a defense, if we just kind of open up and we just try to, like you said, it's cliche. We really need to work together and make it like a conversation, and then we could probably solve some of these big issues.
And I definitely get the like jaded local perspective too. It's not always easy being overrun in town by folks, but I mean it is. I think when you're here, you can forget that. I talked about that trip that I brought 4 friends from the Midwest who'd never been out to the ski in the West before. Like a lot of people are seeing this place for the first time all the time, right? And so we take a lot for granted around here. Just the ability to like walk out of our door and like be in the mountains. And having spent a lot of time pushing strollers and walking dogs, it's every time it's like just hop out. It's like, oh, suddenly you're on the path behind the college. It's like, so you're practically, just in the Sherwins. You can just completely forget about the whole rest of town. And just a quick 45-minute walk, right? So
yeah, I love that walk. And yeah, like we're right here in the middle of town as we speak. But then if we just walk 10 minutes that way, you're in
the woods,
sagebrush and woods. Yeah, exactly. And lastly, I just want to say, how can people find out more about Devil's Creek Distillery, and maybe just anything else you want to add and want people to know about the business?
So we obviously we're online, devilscreekdistillery.com. We can ship products direct to consumer in the state of California, and you can order online from there as well. You can follow us on social media, on Instagram primarily Instagram at Devil's Creek Distillery. We do have a TikTok account. There's not a lot on there. I know you were working on this earlier this year with us, and we should probably do better about that. But it's also Devil's Creek Distillery. You can sign up for our newsletter on the website, and you can stop in.
It's a really great newsletter. I get it sometimes, and I love hearing your updates. And if you want to be the first to know about the adventure series, that's what you gotta do. So sign up for the newsletter. And is there anything else you want to tell the world?
There's a lot I want to tell the world, but maybe not tonight.
Okay. Well, Clayton Mendel, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you.